Okay. Whether you are an NFL, American football fan or not, you have to admit that the NFL theme song goes hard. And yes, depending on the network you're watching a game on, the theme song will change slightly, but they're all bangers. Okay? Bangers. Just saying. I actually love watching sporting events. I love watching sports. I love going to sporting events if I can. I don't watch sports nearly as much as I used to. I used to follow the Premier League like a fiend. That was when I was in college, though, university, and I had the time to do that. And a couple of years after that, I was able to follow it a lot more diligently. Just, I can't keep up with everything. College football, American football, I was following it. March Madness basketball season, lit. Um, you know, I just, I wish I had more time. I love getting worked up over a game. I don't care what it is. One sport I want to see live, hockey. Hockey. It's hockey season again. Guess what? I gotta go to a game. It doesn't take. I gotta go to a hockey game. I want fights. Okay, fights. Anyway, I don't know. This is my brain. Okay, the NFL theme song was playing in my head out of nowhere, and that's what happened. Anyway, girl, bye. So, The Secret History. I wanted to reread The Secret History this year. I first read it in 2021 at the beginning of the year and thoroughly enjoyed it. This hair is driving me crazy. Yeah, I read it in the beginning of 2021 and I really wanted to reread it this year. I'm not going to be able to get around to reading it this year. My reading has slowed down quite a bit. Over the past few years, my annual reading would top out at like 50 something books a year, which I think is pretty good for me. This year, I'm lucky if it's gonna be 20 something, but I'm cool with that. It's slowed down, but I'm really savoring what I'm reading. Not that I wasn't savoring it before, but again, my stuff's just busier and life changes and sometimes a lot of the times I'm not in the mood to read. I want to sit and stare at a wall and process some stuff. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to force myself to read if I'm not in the mood. So by savoring, I mean, when I'm in the mood to read and sit and just knock out a chunk of a book, or even if it's just 10 pages for that day or one page that day, I'm going to enjoy that one page. So all of that to say, I'm not going to be able to get to rereading this book this year. And since I'm reading less, I'm going to pick up more often than not something I haven't read before. But I still want to put a review out there for this. And then when I do get around to rereading it, I can always, add one, right? So, The Secret History. Does this book need an introduction? No. This book can shape people's personalities. People read this book and then all of a sudden they're into dark academia. I can't say I blame them. This book is a mood. Okay, it's a mood. And so at this point, some people could consider it a contemporary classic. The Secret History for a lot of people is a cult classic. People rave about this dark academia novel, and you're like, is it really that good? Is it really that good? Some people who are passionate about this novel, they are passionate about this novel. People who don't like this novel, they don't like this novel. And so when I read it, this was when I was doing my halfway reviews on Instagram. So I would read the first half of the book, post my thoughts, and then I would finish the book and then post a final review. So let's dive into my early 2021 review and what was going on in my brain as I was reading it, because spoiler alert, I loved this novel. It was one of my top reads of 2021. So I found it at the time, you have to put this book in its context, to be quite a unique piece of literature. I mean, because of The Secret History, you then have this whole slew of a very particular type of dark academia books that came after it. Other authors trying to emulate what it was that I think that Donna Tartt successfully achieved here. And so it's set in Vermont in a prestigious fictional university called Hampton College, and the reader becomes engrossed in this microcosm of 6 students who focus on their classical majors, so they're ancient Greece and ancient Rome, and there's a murder. So out of one of these 6 students, he's murdered. And this isn't a spoiler, it's all there. And so it's a murder from within this microcosm of 6 students. And so the narrator, Richard, is narrating the story to lead up to the why for this murder. So we know there's a murder. It's just, why did this happen? So Tartt expertly gives the reader so many clues. Some of them are very blatant, but some of them are actually very subtle as well, which is why I need to read this book again, because there is some stuff she's hiding in plain sight, but there's also symbolism and imagery that is paying homage to ancient Greek and Roman symbolism that you would find in their plays or their tragedies that are giving you clues. There's also things, of course, so you're going to get things like crows, and there's card games going on, and some of the clues are subtle, that it's impossible to catch everything on the first read. A web of symbol, coincidence, premonition, omen. Everything somehow fits together. Some sly and benevolent providence was revealing itself by degrees, and I felt myself trembling on the brink of a fabulous discovery, as though any morning it was all going to come together. My future, my past, the whole of my life, and I was going to sit up in bed like a thunderbolt and say, oh. If you have a background in classical literature and the symbols that were important to the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans, I think you'll really appreciate this novel because, again, like I've said, there are so many references packed into this novel from those 2 ancient civilizations. And so the characters are throwing in a little bit of Latin amongst their conversations and making references to these ancient texts. Is it a little pretentious? Yes. That's the point. That's the point. You get the impression that you're reading a modern Greek tragedy, comedy, and satire all in one. And again, let me go back. So you have this very isolated group of students. It's only 6 of them, and they are embodying what they're studying, and they take it so personally, they become that thing that they're studying. They take Latin and these plays and, these philosophies from these ancient time periods to the extreme, to the point where they end up being actors in their own Greek tragedy. And so, yes, it's going to be pretentious. That's the point. That is the point. This is also one of these novels that can be read purely for entertainment, or you could take your time and analyze it for an eternity. That's just up to your choosing how you want to read this book. There's so much to pick apart. Everything has meaning. Every dog reference, playing to cards. What kind of cards are they looking at? Is it an ace of spades? Is it a joker? Whatever. Crows are everywhere. The weather. These characters themselves are in a play. Again, they're in their own Greek tragedy. They're writing their own script, if you will. And they are representing characters of ancient Greek characters in these plays and these stories at the mercy of the writer's whim, that writer being Donna Tartt. There's a lot of backstage, on stage going on in this novel, and that's why for me this was such a fun read. 5 minutes before Julian arrived, they might be slouched in the living room, curtains drawn, dinner simmering on the chafing dishes in the kitchen, everyone tugging at collars and dull-eyed with fatigue. But the instant the doorbell rang, their spines would straighten. Conversation would snap to life. The very wrinkles would fall from their clothes. So that was what I talked about within the first half. Tartt does take her time building the narrative and the atmosphere. And for me, even though it is a very slow build, the atmosphere to me just is a page turner, especially if you're a fan of that academic New England university setting, very specific. If you're a fan of New England, if you ever lived in New England in the autumn, or you visited New England in the autumn, I can smell it. I can smell it. And so this, I'm telling you, this book is a vibe. This book is a vibe. So that was my first half. Let's go to the second half of my book review and how I summed everything up. You know what? I forgot something. Let me go take something out the freezer real quick so it can thaw. So when I'm done recording these videos, my lunch will be faster to prepare. Please hold. I got sidetracked in my hallway. I'm telling you, my attention span is like that of a rodent sometimes. Okay. Look at his hair. Alfalfa. This was the quote I used to sum up the book in its entirety. The more cultivated a person is, the more intelligent, the more repressed, then the more he needs some method of channeling the primitive impulses he's worked so hard to subdue. Otherwise, those powerful old forces will mass and strengthen until they are violent enough to break free, more violent for the delay, often strong enough to sweep the will away entirely. So yes, we have, again, one of the main characters that was murdered within this tight-knit social group. Now, Richard, our narrator, is in a way injects himself into this group. This group existed before him. And he admires them and he wants to be part of this clique. And so he inserts himself, into this clique. And so he gets wrapped up in this madness. And so this novel does explore how committing such a violent crime impacts those involved. And so for this part of the review, I went back to some ancient Greek concepts. So there's this concept in ancient Greece. You see it in a lot of these plays, ancient Greek tragic plays, actually. This concept of divine madness, which plays a significant role in this novel. And divine madness, mania, according to the ancient Greeks, was brought on by the gods. And so, you start to ask these questions of free will. Once you're wrapped up in this script, you're wrapped up in this role, or it has to play out. So after the murder of this one particular character, these characters also spiral into a type of chaos. And I think that Tartt does an excellent job creating a sense of almost like this claustrophobic panic and frenzy, because these characters are also paranoid that being found out, they've committed not only murder, it was premeditated, in the first degree. So you go into jail, go straight to jail, did not pass to collect $200, but okay. It was like walking into the cockpit of an airplane and finding the pilot and co-pilot passed out drunk in their seats. I was struck by a black, horrendous horror. Who is in control here? I thought dismayed. Who is flying this plane? Tartt also toys around in this novel with the ancient Greeks' belief that the dead will come back to haunt if they were treated wrongly, or if they were murdered or their lives were taken in a nefarious way. This is a warning that's also heavily emphasized in Homer's Iliad. The ancient Greeks had 3 categories from the deceased. So those who were not properly buried, that's number 1. Number 2, those who died prematurely. And number 3, war victims. So in The Secret History, you have these characters who have not just engrossed themselves academically in the ancient Greek and ancient Roman civilizations to study them, they embody it. And they do believe that restless Bunny, they took out Bunny. And that's not a spoiler. From the beginning. They took out poor Bunny, and now they think that poor Bunny is going to haunt them. There are such things as ghosts. People everywhere have always known that, and we believe in them every bit as much as Homer did. Only now we call them different names. Memory, the unconscious. Another thing at the time when I first read The Secret History that clearly, as I wrote here, made me think about is how we romanticize the past. So regardless of how problematic certain aspects of those civilizations may be, and by problematic, I don't mean that in like today's world, everything's problematic these days. Spare me, where I think some words have lost their meanings. But, when we look back at certain things and say, well, we wouldn't do that today. No, you wouldn't. But, we still like to hone in on the brilliance of a time. I think we tend to look back at the past with this haze of nostalgia because in a lot of ways things were simpler. And, where really I think the most fascinating thing is to view these ancient civilizations or former time periods or whatever as a complex whole. And we need to put them in there, but we also need to put them in their proper context, right? That really irks me. My hair is really irking me. That really irks me when people also cherry pick things, and I'm getting on my nerves touching my own hair. It really irks me when people cherry pick history and they just pick out what's unsavory to them, but they don't put it in the context as a whole. People were products of their time. And so, yes, in a lot of ways, the ancient Greeks and Romans, they had beliefs and things that we look at today and be like, nah, playa. But they're also brilliant in their own way. So as I like to say, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And the characters in The Secret History actually do this. They fall in love with the ideals and they have blinders on when it comes to these ancient civilizations at the expense of their own sanity. He refused to see anything about any of us except our most engaging qualities, while he cultivated and magnified to the exclusion of all our tedious and less desirable ones. There are a lot of elements in this novel that I think you could pick out and analyze. Again, for me, a second read is needed for that, just to see what I missed, because I know I missed a lot when I first read it. This is one of those novels that when I first read it, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I still think about it because it bothers me that I know that I missed stuff in the way that my brain works. I got to go back and catch them all. Like Pokemon. Was anybody else obsessed with Pokemon as a kid? I want to be the very best. Do, 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 do. Do, do, do. I still know that theme song word for word, you guys. Anyway, this novel also reminded me how much I enjoyed and still enjoy ancient Greek and ancient Roman civilization and studying it and reading their plays and reading up on them, because I wasn't a classical major. I wasn't a classics major as far as ancient Greece and ancient Rome, but I did take a fair amount of ancient Greek and ancient Rome classes to supplement certain categories within my history degree. And so it's one of those novels that when you read it, it may kind of like give you that urge or that extra push to pick up the Odyssey, pick up the Iliad if you haven't already, or maybe revisit them, or pick up something like Antigone, or, pick up some of the Roman Stoics. It's a darker novel. At the time, I can see how this would be unique. Now, is it unique? No, because people have tried to copy this. But in its own time, I think that this book does stand alone. And yes, it's problematic. That's one thing that I see people complain about. It's problematic. It's not politically. No, this novel is not politically correct. It's a bit coarse. It's a bit vulgar at times. Some of the language is going to make you cringe. So, keep in mind, this was published in the 90s, and it was probably written in the 80s. And so there were things that people said at that time that maybe we wouldn't say today or write it today. But also, I'm of the belief an author can... Again, I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. These characters are unsavory across the board, okay? So, yeah, they gonna say and do some stuff. That's just me. I just don't get my panties in a bunch about that. I just don't. So, anyway, I can see why this book has a cult following. Like, I get it. I get why people read this book and then they want to, like, change their whole personality to, this academic, studious aesthetic. I get it. There's also something cozy and nostalgic about this book as well. But again, I do look forward to going back and rereading this novel and catching all the things that I missed. I gave it a 5 out of 5 when I first read it. I really enjoyed it. It was just a ride. And I remember as I was reading it, one of my cousins ended up reading it. And she remember her messaging me. She was like, this book is insane. She's like, what did you just convince me to pick up? She's like, but I mean this in the best way. She's like, she could not put it down. And so, yeah. We're also related, so, clearly we think similarly. But anyway, The Secret History, I think that most people pick, clicking on this video at this point, you've read it, or it's one of those books that's been on your radar because it's just been out there for such a long time and it has such a following. Have you read it? What were your thoughts? I get why people probably don't like this book. Again, it's a slow burn. And some people are like, why should you need to do all that? It could be half the length. But for me, the slow burn is part of the fun because these characters are insane. Okay? Drama. But please leave your thoughts and comments down below. Also, feel free to like, subscribe, and follow me on Instagram where I get up to more book shenanigans. I post all of my book content there first. And, yeah. What else am I going to say? Yeah, all my book content goes there first. And I like to post the occasional goofy meme or reel in the Instagram stories. And with that, my brain blanked. It's getting time for lunch. And with that, I will see you in the next one. Bye.